Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Larry Rhodes, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them, and for people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs. Today's program is a guest call from Rita Swan. Rita Swan, I kind of glossed over it. From the organization of Children's Healthcare is a Legal Duty. Later on in the show, we will speak about one of our 4 favorite freethinkers whose birth anniversary is this month.
All right, well, so this is a call-in show. However, we have only one phone line. So while we're speaking with today's guest, we invite you to email in questions to us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. All right. We hope that Rita will be calling in soon. And Larry, tell us about the Atheist Society of Knoxville.
Okay. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup group that often meets at a bar or eatery. Sometimes we even do karaoke. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Old City for happy hour and after the show, food, drink, and conversation. Also, Friday, we generally meet at different locations. This Friday will be at Sunspot down on the Cumberland Avenue Strip by UT. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of the God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to visit our happy hour for food, drink, or conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
All right. Well, the monthly activity of the Rationalists of East Tennessee are like this. The first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday is book club, and the fourth Sunday is a reflections gathering, a potluck afternoon get-together at a member's home. December 4th's roundtable discussion is Whither Democracy?
December is also the holiday time for many atheists and agnostics and RET members. We'll be holding a solstice party sometime during the month.
Last year, we shared our favorite holiday foods and fellowship. Many members missed the social interaction with which they had become accustomed to in churches. So, we got together and we even had a bit of secular singing. We had a secular choir, so to speak. I try not to sing too loud and let those who can do so carry the tune.
Visit our websites for additional monthly program details, including time and locations.
All right. Well, we're hoping Rita is out there going to call in soon. I guess we can do the In the News segment at this point.
Until she calls, sure.
All right. Well, last week we remembered the Lincoln Tunnel sign put up in 2010 by the American Atheist Association. It caused quite a stir by them saying regarding the nativity and all that, that it's a myth.
Yep. Well, they're back with a new billboard for 2011. From their press release, it says, Dave Silverman, president of the American Atheists, said last year's myth billboard was incredibly successful and garnered a lot more attention than we conceived. This year's billboard should be equally thought-provoking and spark plenty of conversations nationally, but especially in New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Florida.
All right. Well, also in the news, in North Carolina, Sheriff Ed Brown has used his badge and symbol of government office in a personal advertisement promoting religion and asserting that wisdom does not come from the books of man or degrees of man learning.
The sheriff is true to the Bible, about which it has observed there is no praise for learning. We hope someone tells Sheriff Brown that centuries of prayer to Jehovah never cured smallpox, but science, the wisdom of man has eradicated it.
And we have polio on the run. Polio was nearly eradicated, except that once again religion reared its head in the form of, I guess,
people who wouldn't take the vaccine.
Some Islamists who were saying that, it's all a Western conspiracy. And so there's a small pocket of it still somewhere in Asia, I guess.
I always like to say that smallpox is one of the many plagues that God can no longer give you.
Yeah, there we go. Well, the Freedom from Religion Foundation has issued a formal request to the U.S. Forest Service to uphold its original decision to deny the Knights of Columbus renewal of a special use permit for the Jesus Shrine on top of Big Mountain in Flathead National Forest.
If the government makes a place for one religion, it must make room for all to be fair and to follow the Constitution. It should not play favorites. So if Jesus stays, I look forward to seeing the erection of the Flying Spaghetti Monster Shrine there pretty soon.
All right, that'll be great. I'll go skiing there. Okay. Well, so we haven't heard from Rita yet. You did bring her newsletter. Perhaps we could talk about some of the contents of the newsletter from the Child's Health Care.
Well, I think it ran off.
Yeah, I guess it's...
Is Rita here?
Can we get our newsletter back?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
If you'll put up the Rita Swan video, or not video, website.
Here we go.
childrenshealthcare.org is the website.
There we go.
Not sized exactly correctly for this, but anyway, do visit the site. She has a place there, and they have a place there for many children who are the victims of religion, as well as several other types of problems.
There we go. Well, there was a member of the Rationalists of East Tennessee who sent us this newsletter to our email list several weeks ago, and I found it a very moving thing to read. It's stories about how parents have denied medical treatment to their children.
Of abuse itself.
As well as some, the word horrific comes to mind. Horrific stories of using discipline to the point where they've beaten children very badly. And I'm trying to remember if there was specifics of beating them to death or not.
Excuse me.
And
maybe Rita. Are you having trouble, Rita?
So I became aware of the fact that there were books about punishing children called something like No Greater Joy, a Michael Pearl book on training children, where they describe how you are to beat them with a switch. That Bible phrase says, do not spare the rod. And, there's other passages about how bruises are what, leads a child to wisdom. And you've got this guy, Michael Pearl, writing this book saying how, unless you bruise your children, you're abusing them. I believe his book has been, linked to, horrible abuses and even deaths of children. It's amazing when you go online and you read the book reviews for these things. They're the most polarized book reviews I've ever seen. They'll be all 5 stars or all 1 star, and it lays down right by, or it's predictive of what the
person is going to say in the comments.
The beliefs are. The Christians. All right, looks like Rita's here. All right, here we go. Hello, Rita. Welcome to Freethought Forum.
Hi, Rita.
Hi.
Thank you for calling in today.
You're welcome.
All right. We were talking a little bit about the newsletter. I read it was the 2011 newsletter that the stories were so heartrending that it made me want to contact you. And maybe you could tell us, though, what is the mission of CHILD, the organization you're part of?
CHILD is an acronym for Children's Health Care is a Legal Duty. It's a national membership organization. Its mission is to stop child abuse and neglect that is related to religious beliefs or other rigid belief systems, cultural beliefs, or even purely secular beliefs. And so we publish newsletters speaking out against many forms of child abuse and neglect that are justified on religious grounds or grounds of cultural traditions. We work heavily on public policy because the Christian Science Church has almost single-handedly gotten hundreds of religious exemption laws into state codes that allow parents to deprive their children of some forms of medical care on religious grounds.
And you mentioned that CHILD is an acronym. I think we may have already mentioned, but why don't you tell us what that acronym stands for?
The official name of the organization is Children's Health Care is a Legal Duty, and from that we get the acronym CHILD.
And I think that's great, because that really lays out very starkly the difference that, we have a duty to our children to provide them with a safe, healthy childhood.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at your website now. Is there a way we can get her picture on there a little bit more? It's kind of cut off. What's surprising is that right off the bat you see that under issues and cares you have many religion-related problems. Religion-related medical neglect, corporal punishment, therapeutic or residential programs, exorcisms, polygamy. A lot of people don't realize that this is actually going on out there. Some parents are actually doing exorcism on their children. Of course, cultural abuses, sexual abuse, child welfare services. A lot of times the child welfare services cannot get the parents to cooperate because of religious reasons. Is that correct?
Yes, it becomes very difficult. And you're right, there is a broad variety of abuses committed against children in the name of religion. Certainly we've seen the 500 children in the polygamy sect in Texas. Several of those children had been forced into early marriages, forced into sex, and there have been a number of children died from exorcisms where parents believed that the children were possessed with devils and that they were acting in the child's best interest to hold the child's head in a toilet or beat on the child or starve the child in an attempt to rid the child of demons.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, so many of these parents actually believe they're acting in the child's best interest, and so this is a case where sincerity and love are not enough.
Mm-hmm. This is particularly horrendous because the child is helpless and at the mercy of society, and generally the reasons that society come together can be argued that it's for the children, for the sake of the next generation. And here we have religion working directly in opposition to that goal.
Yes, in a democracy, we're extremely dependent on having the next generation come forward to pay our Social Security and vote for our legislators and keep society running. And so the state should have a very high, compelling interest in maintaining the health and safety of its children. Mm-hmm. And in our system of government, we have an initial presumption that parents do act in the best interest of their children. The state cannot intervene frivolously into family privacy, but when parents just simply aren't doing their duty to protect the child's health and safety, then the state has a right to step in. Child Protection Services should have the right to intervene. And the laws should very clearly state that a parent has a legal duty to do everything in their power to safeguard the health and safety of a child. this is a basic law of nature, and if it weren't the law, none of us would be here. And so it should be enshrined as a state law also, we believe. And it's not that religious rituals are wrong if they're basically harmless, and we don't try to outlaw them altogether, but certainly the parent should have a legal duty to get medical care in addition to any religious or cultural rituals that they want to practice.
So, Rita, may I ask, are children who are homeschooled maybe more vulnerable because perhaps if they're homeschooled they don't have to have a medical exam like I know I had to have before starting public school?
Yes, and some states exempt them from immunizations simply if they're homeschooled. And of course, teachers in every state in this country are mandated reporters of suspected child abuse and neglect.
As well as any other school officer, counselors, principals, that type of thing.
If children are homeschooled, then they aren't seen by those mandated reporters.
So where there are cases of neglect, is it far more prevalent in homeschool children, or will public school children be as likely to have neglect?
I suspect it's higher among the homeschooled children. We do know of several cases of homeschooled children who have died either because of religion-based medical neglect or religion-based abuse.
And what happens to those parents? Anything?
Well, in the physical abuse cases, they are usually charged. Roughly, we would estimate that about 1/4 of the religion-based medical neglect deaths of children are charged.
1/4?
Yeah, probably not more than that. And sometimes it's because of religious exemption laws that the Christian Science Church has gotten into state codes that protect a parent's right to withhold medical care from children on religious grounds. In Tennessee, you have a case, and it's in your part of Tennessee, Lenoir City, Tennessee.
Yeah, that's not far at all. There could be people watching this program.
And this child died 10 years ago. Her name was Jessica Crank, and she died at 15 years old of a form of childhood cancer. And her mother, Jacqueline Crank, belonged to the New Life Tabernacle, whose minister, Ariel Ben Sherman, preached against medical care. And Ariel Ben Sherman has set up shop in many different states around the country. Back in the 1980s, he had a commune in Oregon where children were subjected to physical abuse. And then he has moved to other states, but then he was also in Tennessee when this teenager died. And both Sherman and the mother have been charged with child neglect, but that case has never come to trial because of Tennessee's religious exemption laws.
No.
And the defendants have raised all kinds of objections based on the religious exemption laws, and different courts have issued different rulings on what these religious exemption laws mean.
Any chance we've had emails?
And
No.
the district attorney is just hanging on to the case to try to clarify the laws.
Yeah.
But, you know, after 10 years, I think many prosecutors would have given up.
Yeah. Would you put up the email address again, please? One thing that gets me is that people like this can come into a community and basically instruct parents to beat their children, exercise them, do whatever they need to, but they are held blameless when the parents actually do it. The parents may go to prison, go to jail, do do time, whatever. But here's that preacher standing up there in the pulpit doing the same thing the week after that, week after that, week after that, and they have no culpability in the matter. And unlike child pedophiles or something, they don't have to notify you when they move into your neighborhood.
Right.
Wow.
It is very frustrating that a minister has a First Amendment right to say whatever he wants to from the pulpit. He can say that medical doctors are demon-possessed and that they never heal disease and that God heals all disease and you should never go to medical doctors. And the preacher has a First Amendment right to say that. The only way that he could be held accountable is if he was pretty much in the home where the child was dying.
Yeah, but even then, the First Amendment rights don't allow you to yell fire in a crowded theater. It doesn't allow you to incite to riot. Doesn't allow you certain things like that. And I, for one, think that we ought to expand that law a little bit for this type of thing where people are actually harmed.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's only one case that I know of in the entire history of the United States where a preacher was charged, and in that case he was right in the home as the child was dying and was directing the parents.
Well, I don't know if it's Charles Manson, but he also got charged, even though he didn't do the murders. He was charged for sending his people out to do it, and to me that's along the same line.
That's interesting, yes. Mm-hmm.
Was there a particular incident that caused the formation of child? Would that be?
Well, my husband and I learned the hard way. We were Christian Scientists. We were raised as children in the church, and in 1977 we lost our only son to a treatable illness because of following the Christian Science beliefs against medical care. We left the church right after his death and have dedicated our lives to enhancing the rights of children to medical care and getting them equal protection of the law, to repealing as many religious exemptions from child health and safety laws as we can.
Well, I certainly, for one, applaud you and your work.
But Rita, your story there touched on a question I was meaning to ask as well, and that is, for families that have lost a child, does that often cause them to change their ways, or are there many repeat offenders? Any idea on the statistics or distribution of that?
I'm afraid that most parents, when they lose a child, they can't afford to admit that they're wrong at that point. My husband and I began speaking out in 1979 when we were on national television. We've been on many television programs and other media programs since then, but we remain the only ex-Christian Scientists in the country who are willing to discuss losing a child.
Wow, you're the only couple. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, man, I certainly must congratulate you on your bravery on that. Wow.
I assume you've got a book out now. Can we bring that slide up for that? I haven't read the book. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Was that about the event that you were describing now?
Yes. It's about the illness and death of our son. It's about how Christian Science deals with illness and what the Christian Science faith healers were telling us when our son was dying.
The Last Strawberry. It's kind of hard to see the title on there. I did want to get that out.
Yeah, so The Last Strawberry.
Right. So I'm very sorry to hear about all that. I can't imagine. I've never had any children myself, but to have that happen to you because someone told you that God wanted that to happen, I cannot fathom it.
Yeah, I have to admit I'm not sure even how to talk about the subject. Obviously, you're real brave, and it feels terribly intrusive to want to go into much detail about that.
But very important, too, to share the story.
So that's what your book, then, is going to be about. Wow.
Yes. There are tremendous pressures on the parents in faith healing sects in this situation. You know, I mean, they've been trained to believe that you don't question God, you know. I mean, if you doubt that you're going to get a healing, then of course you won't get a healing.
Right. They blame the victim.
Right. They up the ante on that.
Right.
You know? And they also give you a guilt trip for not having enough faith and for questioning. And they believe that all disease is morally caused. You know, it indicates some sin, and in the case of a little child, Christian Science says that the disease is caused by the sins of his parents. And,
right. Sure.
So you're put in a position, you know, first of all, you're desperately trying to do what the church healers tell you to do because you want to get your son well. Mm-hmm. And they give you these penitence projects to work on. They say that they have the answer, that they're the authority figures, and if you just get rid of these errors in your life, your son will be well. So they dangle out these promises, and they tell you not to be afraid. They tell you that if you are afraid, you're interfering with their healing work. They were repeatedly complaining about my maternal fears interfering with them. They really, expect you to detach and let them take control. But then, you know, when the child dies, they say, oh, well, that was all your decision to rely on Christian Science.
Wow.
You know, they don't take any responsibility for what happens.
Yeah. One religious leader, I've talked to several, when they say, you know, how dare you question God, I like to tell them, I'm not talking to God, I'm talking to you. And are you God? Because generally they set themselves up as the mediator between God and you, when there's actually no evidence that, one, a God exists, or two, that they're the representative.
So Rita, did they do that to you? Did they man, I forget how Larry said that initially. Did they essentially say to question them is to question God?
Well, he said, how dare you question God, was one of the points she was making.
Okay.
When she was talking to her religious leader.
I wasn't certain who I heard that from.
Yeah.
Wow. I have a question. As you were describing this, I couldn't help but think that it just seems like this sort of problem can't go on except if it's in a kind of a small church, that the larger a church is, the more likely there's going to be someone who would say, well, you know, this didn't work the last time, why are we doing it again? So how big was your circle of friends within the church when this was happening to you?
Well, we belonged to one of the three largest Christian Science churches in Michigan at that time, and it had about 200 members.
Wow.
It is kind of unbelievable that a group of 200 people could maintain this belief, you know.
Well, that's...
And after our son died, there were people in the church that were trying to keep us in the church, and they would come and tell us stories about prominent people in the church who had lost children, and it didn't destroy their faith in Christian Science.
It didn't even occur to them that it might be a problem, that people are losing children in the church.
And one of the people that we learned about was actually the state lobbyist for the Christian Science Church, and we had heard him give a testimony in church just a couple of months before our son died, and he was bragging that because of Christian Science he had never missed a day's work in all of his working years due to illness. And so Christian Science had kept him healthy all the time. And then after our son died, one of the church members came to us and said, well, this fellow, his name was Mr. Yoki, he lost his son, and he came to a church meeting the very day his son died and didn't even tell the other church members about it, and he just went right on with his church faith and went on to higher offices in the church. I mean, they were recommending that as the way we should deal with it, you know, and we had no idea that he had lost a child. One of our problems was we moved around quite a bit for academic reasons, and so we hadn't been in the church that long, in that particular branch church. And so we didn't know the stories of the horror stories that had happened years before, you know. But, I mean, that was just totally shocking that here this fellow would get up and give a testimony about how Christian Science had done so well for him, and he had never missed a day's work due to illness, and yet his son had died of pneumonia.
And theoretically, it's his fault because of his sins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
They don't take that into consideration either.
Wow. I'm just amazed at the. You know, it feels like you've opened up a little cover into just an evil play going on, apparently within our community around us that I was pretty ignorant of. Wow.
And if people were doing this type of activity and it wasn't under the purview of religion, we'd put them away pretty darn quick. But since it's under religion, we forgive all kinds of evil practices like this.
Mm-hmm. In Arkansas, the Christian Science Church has even gotten a religious defense to capital murder. And,
really?
You know, it's almost comical to think that two different parents could kill a child, and one parent could be executed, and the other parent, who said he did it for religious reasons, wouldn't even face criminal charges.
Did you say that was in Arkansas?
Yes.
How long ago was this? I mean, how long has that law been on the books?
Well, Governor Clinton signed it into law before he became president.
No kidding. Wow. Did not know that.
Well, in West Virginia has a law with a religious defense to fatal neglect of a child, and they base it on the Internal Revenue Service policy. And that's another bizarre thing, that in 1943, the Christian Science Church got the Internal Revenue Service to make a policy that that the bills for Christian Science prayers would be reimbursable, would be tax-deductible medical expenses.
Wow.
The Christian Science Church calls their prayers treatments,
right?
And they send bills for these treatments.
Yeah, I am aware that insurance companies will pay Christian Science practitioners for treating their infirm patients, even though they don't do anything other than just pray by the bedside. Which is
well, they don't
terrible.
even come to the bedside. You just call them up on the telephone.
Oh, really?
They say they'll pray, and
so even they phone it in.
Oh my
take
goodness.
their word for it that they did, and then they send a bill.
Mm-hmm. What?
But,
if we know if some of our viewers know of any ongoing medical neglect that's going on, or suspect it, what should they do?
They should report to Child Protection Services. And Child Protection Services should investigate, and if the child is sick and not getting medical care and the parents won't do it, then Child Protection Services should go to court and petition for an order for the medical care.
What about calling 911?
Well, that would do too.
Okay.
I assume that that's where you see an acute activity. Man. Mm-hmm. So the Child Protection Services, that's a state entity? Would that be something all states have?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
You'd indicated you could spend about half an hour with us. You spent
We
that.
encourage people to peruse our website at www.childrenshealthcare.org. We welcome donations, which can be made by credit card through PayPal at the webpage. We would be happy to have more members. We would be happy to have any information you can pass along that comes to your attention about child abuse and neglect that seems to be related to people's religious beliefs or cultural traditions.
All right.
And hold the lawmakers accountable.
Hold the evildoers accountable.
No, the lawmakers
right.
as well, because they're the ones just creating the loopholes that these people can use.
All right.
Part of that is lawmakers' mercy. You just have to beg them to change the laws.
Yep.
And we have gotten the laws improved in 12 states.
Very good.
There's plenty of work.
In what way was there improvement? What was the atmosphere that brought about that improvement?
Well, usually it's a sensational death of a child. Lawmakers usually don't act on this issue until there is a death and until the press or the public is aware of it and concerned about it.
All right. Are you able to speak with us a little longer? I was hoping you might comment on these Michael Pearl books that I learned about by reading your newsletter.
Well, yes, he's a Tennessee phenom, and he has no degrees in child development. He just barely has any formal academic training in theology, and yet he has published these books on child training that have brought in millions of dollars, and so many parents believe in them. He believes in corporal punishment of children, and more than punishment, he describes hitting children as a way of training children. And so in some cases, he recommends hitting children before they've even done anything wrong, and even little babies. And like other fundamentalists, he doesn't believe that you should hit the child with your hand. He thinks the child should identify the hand as a loving instrument. And so he recommends rods, which, of course, is what the Bible talks about, hitting a child with a rod. And so, he claims that that's the safe way to hit a child when obviously it's not. And obviously, if a parent strikes a child with a belt or a whip or a stick, the parent is not as aware of the force that they're using as if they use their own hand.
And it's a force multiplier as well.
Of course. I mean, the principle of physics, would indicate that you've got a lever at your disposal there when you're hitting a child with a whip or a stick.
Right.
But, he takes these verses out of the book of Proverbs, and one of them in the older translations of the Bible says that if you beat a child with a rod, he won't die, but instead you'll deliver his soul from hell. And fundamentalists seize upon that verse. I shouldn't say all fundamentalists, because, my goodness, there are 60 to 80 million people in this country who identify themselves as fundamentalists, and they're not monolithic. But there are certain fundamentalist leaders that seize upon that verse and say, you just won't harm the child if you hit him with a rod and follow our instructions. And Michael Pearl believes that you won't break the skin if you hit the child with a rod, and therefore you won't leave bruises or marks that will concern Child Protection Services. So he claims it's safe for the child to be hit that way and also safe for the parents. And it's absolutely possible to beat a child to death without breaking the skin. because you cause hemorrhagic shock, which, floods the body, other systems of the body, causes kidney failure, and the child dies very suddenly.
And the younger the child, the more likely that would happen.
Right. So there have been 3 children die in the past couple of years, and had parents who were following Michael Pearl's books. And of course he says, well, they didn't read them right, or they didn't do it right, but there are many statements in that book that are dangerous and can be interpreted by parents as justifying hitting a child severely and causing severe damage.
Once again, it's protected by the First Amendment. You can write whatever you want to in a book, but then again, there are books on how to build nuclear weapons and other things that are outlawed, that you cannot disseminate certain types of information. But then when we allow this type of book to say use a rod to beat a child, especially a small child. I don't know. There's got to be some answer to this out there, but I don't know what it is offhand. But we need to find out what we can do about this type of thing and start a conversation anyway about it.
All right. Wow. Rita, I must say the whole subject has been very disturbing. I guess probably the only way to put something positive on this is to once again thank you for the work you're doing, giving visibility to this. So do you travel much to speak about this? Your organization there, do you have people who go to communities or television shows frequently?
Not frequently anymore. Back in the 1980s, we were very frequently on television. I do give some talks at professional conferences. I have 2 engagements for next March. So it's not every month, but it does take place. And we have some members around the country who could speak at conferences.
So a contribution to your organization would help them with travel expenses and things like that?
Oh, yes. And my husband and I actually relocated to Oregon for 4 months this year to get their laws changed.
Wow.
We just thought the situation was so desperate in Oregon. And this dates way back. There's a church in Oregon City called Followers of Christ, and they had lost scores of children because of their religious beliefs against medical care. And no public officials were doing anything about it until I spoke at a national conference in San Diego. And then the prosecutor in that county raced up to me afterwards, and she said, "We have deaths. We have these deaths. What shall we do?" And we found out that the laws in Oregon were terrible. The Christian Science Church had gotten a religious defense to murder and manslaughter and criminal...
you just got to take them to the courts.
Criminal non-support. There was no way that the prosecutor could file any charges. And 3 weeks after I spoke, she had a little boy die of diabetes in her county because of the religious beliefs against medical care.
Mm-hmm. And that's just one state that you're talking about right there, one area.
Just one congregation. And she said she couldn't do a thing about it, but she did alert the press, and the press went out to the cemetery of this church and found 78 children buried. And so that was back in 1998. We got a bill sponsor to sponsor a bill that repealed 9 religious exemptions in Oregon. And the Christian Science Church fought us tooth and nail. I did not go out there to live at that point, but I did make several trips out there, and our Oregon members worked very hard on it. And we finally got a bill passed that repealed 5 of the 9 religious exemptions in Oregon that we needed to have repealed. And we thought that that would be enough to change the behavior of the followers of Christ, because it did open a way for the prosecution to file some criminal charges. And for many years, it seemed that they were taking their children to doctors, and we didn't hear of medical neglect deaths in that church until 2009, I believe. But then 3 children died of easily preventable causes, and another child had a growth near her eye that was pushing the eyeball out of the socket, and the parents wouldn't get medical care. And so we decided that we needed to repeal the other 4 religious exemptions in Oregon, which were to murder and manslaughter and failure to provide physical care to a child. So my husband and I actually moved out to Oregon at the end of December and lived there from January 1 till the end of April, and got a bill passed to repeal the remaining religious exemptions from providing medical care to a sick child. So once again, we really hope that will be enough to change the behavior of these very stubborn people.
Yeah. You've been involved in this battle for quite a while now. What's your prognosis? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Is it pushing a snowball up a hill, or what's it like?
Perhaps,
well,
are there places where...
The Christian Science Church is putting out better advice for their members now, and I haven't seen a death of a Christian Science child since 2003 in the United States.
Wow.
They are founding schools in Africa, which frightens me. I doubt that these countries in Africa have the manpower to look into these situations, or, maybe not good enough laws. I mean, where they just barely have medical care.
Right.
They probably don't have laws that require all parents to provide medical care. So that's bad, but in the United States, the Christian Science Church is less reckless with the lives of children. They're still not telling their members what I think they should tell them, but they are better than they were in 1977 when we lost our son. But the other charismatic faith healing sects, I'm not sure that they're getting better. We'll just have to see, because the new laws in Oregon provide mandatory minimum sentences for serious crimes, and so these parents could be going to jail for a long, long time.
Maybe that'll send a message out to the rest of the congregation.
Right.
I've got an email from a watcher. It says, would you consider making children feel guilty about hell would constitute emotional abuse? I know.
Yes, but maybe not in a legal sense. I certainly don't think it's a good way to control children. But legally, it's probably within the parents' rights to teach their religion to children. And emotional abuse is defined in state law. It has to be pretty severe for Child Protection Services to have a right to intervene in emotional abuse. It would have to be a diagnosable mental illness.
Okay.
All right.
Kind of makes me wonder why they don't shut down some of these hell houses. I mean, there's quite a bit of emotional abuse going on there, and they allow any aged child to go through there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have some other questions? Or?
No. Rita, did you have any other points you wanted to make?
Well, I think we've covered the ground fairly well. The medical neglect, religion-based medical neglect, is the only form of child abuse that's protected by law, protected by state law. However, I think of something else now. The Amish have gotten a federal law giving them a religious exemption from child labor laws. The federal child labor laws. So, there's another aspect that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
Rita, we've received another question from a viewer. They asked, in what is your degree in, and were you degreed at the time you lost your child, or is that something you did afterwards?
I have a PhD in English literature, and my husband has a PhD in mathematics. And we both had our PhDs before we lost our son. So, we're an example of people who were intellectually very accomplished, but also into a very controlling, non-rational religion. Christian scientists are often high achievers in society. Henry Paulson, Bush's Secretary of the Treasury, is a Christian scientist, and he was the chairman of Goldman Sachs. He's a billionaire, and there are other Christian scientists who are multimillionaires. Henry Paulson tells in his memoir that during the financial collapse in 2008, he was tempted to take sleeping pills, and then he stuck with his Christian Science beliefs and flushed the sleeping pills down the toilet. So, he's a devout Christian scientist who also can make billions of dollars with secular knowledge and skill.
Would you say the Christian Science pushes its members toward more technical fields? Or are they allowed to go into philosophy or medicine or biology?
Well, they could go into philosophy, I think, but they could not be, well, it's hard to say, but it's certainly discouraged to acquire medical knowledge of the body, and many Christian scientists really bend over backwards to avoid acquiring knowledge, because Mary Baker Eddy says that knowledge of disease causes disease. And I certainly tried to avoid studying biology. The undergraduate college that I went to did have a biology requirement, and so I fulfilled that requirement by taking a 2-credit course in nature study. And I made a butterfly collection and a leaf collection, but did not have to learn anything about the body.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left in the show. You've really opened some eyes here. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing. I wish you all the best
Sam,
going
please
forward.
put up her website again so that people can go and find
childrenshealthcare.org.
Yes. And we encourage viewers to have a heightened vigilance for this problem. And we hope that we'll have a brighter future for children in America.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Rita, thank you very much. We'll say bye then.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
All right. Wow. Well, we were going to speak a little bit about
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
Well, we can.
November is the birth anniversary of Mark Twain. And do we want to talk here? You've got a little biographical information.
Sure.
Man, it feels like kind of an abrupt change to leave that
Maybe
subject.
we should just do the break or the.
We got the. All right, we can talk about our organizations. Yeah, let's.
I also just got an email in from a viewer who would like us to go over some of the information about our organizations because he's interested in it.
All right. Well, Goodness, I'm going to either have to work off the top of my head or you're going to have to start us here.
Well, there's a program break.
Yeah. Well, this program, Freethought Forum, is sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. We are here every week on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m., and it's a call-in show. Well, we do have a call, Larry. Shall we take this call?
Okay. Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname? And we need to make
it's
it.
Rhonda. Y'all know me.
Oh, hey, Rhonda. We've only got about 4 minutes left in the show. We've got a little bit to cover. Did you have a comment?
Okay, I can fill up that 4 minutes real quick.
Well,
As far as the children being abused, I think it is terrible. The Bible calls the rod is just a stick. It's not a metal rod.
I understand.
Which you still should not hit your child with that by no means.
Even though it says to in the Bible.
Do you know what causes these people to do this? Satan.
well, Rita, we
devil.
have to disagree with you on that. We don't think Satan exists, and we don't think Jehovah exists.
And
we think bad ideas exist.
And in the Bible, it's actually saying that God tells you to do this stuff. In the Bible,
Old Testament before Christ.
is the Ten Commandments no good anymore then?
Oh, they're always good.
Well, they're in
They're
the
in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
You're picking and choosing what you want to believe, which is great. It's just
No, I don't pick and choose what I want to believe.
I think you do.
But Rita, the Old Testament contains the Bible. It contains, the Old Testament contains the Ten Commandments. It contains instructions for how Jews to enslave non-Jews. You know, it's loaded with bad ideas.
You should stone your children if they're.
You call it loaded. The Bible has places in it I do not agree with.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Glad to hear that. I've always felt that the more good people are is in indirect proportion to how closely they follow their religion.
I think everybody should take care of their children, treat them with respect, or they would not be in DCS or in the states. In the state situation, because 9 times out of 10, these state homes they put them in are also abusing them, are also doing the same things to them from the parents they took them from.
They're not saying that God's telling them to do it, though. Yeah. We've got to let you go. 2 minutes left in the show. We have a little bit of material we got to cover.
Thank you for calling in.
Thanks for calling.
That material, and I'll talk to you next week.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye. Okay, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by these groups and by individual contributions. Shows are most every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern Time on this community access channel, or you can go to ctvknox.org and watch it live streaming every Tuesday.
All right, I'm falling down on my part here.
And you can send us feedback at the email address on the screen, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
All right. So I'll grab your part now.
Okay.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets several times during the week. We have evening meetups for food, fun, and drink, where atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and humanists who reach out with social support to other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our mission statement is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to the rationalists and atheists in the Knoxville area. Remember, you are not alone.
Visit the ASK site, shown on the screen, to join and find times and locations. That website is knoxvilleatheists.org.
All right. You can also visit the Rationalists of East Tennessee at rationalists.org, and there's an S at the end of rationalists.
You can see them at the top of the screen, the two websites. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by ASK and RET.
We want to thank people for calling in, and we'd like to thank the staff here at CTV Knox and Sam and Jonas for the technical support, and especially all of our callers and our guest, Rita.
Okay. Thank you, Rita. Keep up the good work.